Hello from Ukraine. You're watching Channel 24. My name is Andriy Drozda, and our guest today is Dr. Phillip Karber. He is the president of the Potomac Foundation and a recognized expert on defense and national security who prepares defense strategy recommendations for U.S. government officials. Dr. Karber, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so the first question today, for the first time in probably the modern history of the armored force of Ukraine, we conducted a successful operation to encircle the Russian army in Liman on the northern part of Donetsk region. What do you think about this battle near Liman, and what would be your forecast for this region, you know, the borderline of Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions on the east of Ukraine?
First of all, congratulations to all of your troops and the command, all the way up from the commander-in-chief down to the guys in the trenches. It's just a phenomenal effort. I think that's an enormous success. I'm not sure how many Russians you're going to catch in the bag there. But whether they flee or whether you catch them, it's a major success. The interesting thing is whether they were already repositioning their forces out of the Kharkiv Oblast. Obviously, they wanted to stop on the river line, and that's already been penetrated. But whether they're planning on, they were doing that as to put in a prepared positional defense, or whether they're just collapsing. I don't have a good feel for what their strategy is. There's talk about them, the First Guards Tank Army, which I'd followed since its creation. Actually, I used to prepare plans for our troops against First Guards Tank Army in Germany during the Cold War. It was their premier formation, and created in 2015, and just the best of the best, supposedly. But essentially destroyed, or at least made completely combat ineffective, and now supposedly they're bringing reserve equipment and reservists with little or even even just civilians with no military training, and fleshing out some of the beat-up units of First Guards Tank Army, and then going to, quote, deploy it around further to the south. So I'm not sure. I don't have a good feel of what their strategy, and to be honest, I'm not sure they do. They seem to be in a very much of a reactive mode, and the commands seem to be overstressed, and the troops seem to be heavily demoralized. That is not, by the way, a reason why people either in the West or in Ukraine should be joyful or expecting imminent collapse. I was looking at it the last couple of days. The Russians have launched in the Luhansk, Donetsk area. They have launched 13 to 15 tactical offensives. So they're still having an offensive attempt to get the rest of Donetsk Oblast in their control. And so this battle's not over yet.
Yeah, this battle is not over yet. I just wanted to ask you, why do you think Putin has changed his mind on mobilization campaign, on this draft campaign he announced? He started actually last week, because in the springtime, he just stated, he said that he doesn't need any mobilization campaigns to win this war, to defeat Ukraine. But now he wants to get some hundreds of thousands new soldiers into his army. Why did he just change his position and views?
To be honest, I think this whole war, obviously the war has been going on since 2014, but this stage of the war since the 24th of February, from his perspective, strikes me as delusional. He thought he could take Kiev in a few, in a quick coup de main. maybe he assumed that there were people who would jump to their. I can't imagine what assumptions. I can't imagine what planet he's on, let alone what intelligence was being fed to him that led him to believe that there would be sort of this instant, collapse of Kiev. He way overstretched his forces, again under the assumption, I guess, that Ukrainian forces would either be too weak, too overstretched to put up a sustained resistance, and now this sort of hasty withdrawal from Kharkiv Oblast, and yet hanging on to Kherson and trying to launch offensives. It's a bizarre strategy. I'm not sure how rational it is. So then you put the mobilization in that context. Now, the Russians have roughly of their ground forces, roughly 40% are conscripts, and about 40% are contractors traditionally. And the contractor, both can sign contracts that when they are released from service, they also owe a certain amount of reserve time afterwards. So that would be the natural crowd to return. Also, when he brought the various armies from the Far East, in particular, the 5 armies from the Far East, he only brought part of them. He wasn't obviously denuding the entire Far East and central military regions or southern military regions. So he brought maybe 50, 60% of those forces. So there was still some active forces left. A lot of them, though, were basically conscripts, which he said he didn't want to use. So ostensibly, there's a pool of reservists that should be could be called up, just like Ukraine had reservists that have been called up. And they're of varying quality depending on how long they've been out of the service, and so forth. But this the way it's being approached is just. I saw a comment today. I think it's true that there are more Russians who have fled Russia than are supposed to be called up in the 300,000. And okay, so it's clearly failing. Now. There are a lot. I mean, Russia's a big country. It's 140 million, whatever. So there's a large supply of males that could be called up, but
the quantity and quality is two different things. It doesn't. It's not equal things.
Absolutely. But General Zabrowski recently had a piece, I think was probably the best analysis I've read of the mobilization and its impact, and he was very critical of Russian weaknesses. But in the end, he also pointed out, this is my phrase, but my interpretation of what he was saying is, quantity in the end has a quality of its own. I mean, there is a point where if Russia took the time to mobilize 1 million or 2 people, train them and bring them not just back into these areas, but again, that make it a 3,000 or 2,500 kilometer front with Russian armies back into Belarus and back threatening Kiev, back threatening Chernigov, Konotop, and so forth. Then it's an enormous front for your forces to cover. But that would take months, maybe half a year or longer to materialize that large a threat. In the interim, I think he has trouble. But I think it's also important, and this tends to be lost by a lot of Western commentators. People originally said, "Oh, the Russians won't attack." Then some of the same commentators said, "Oh, Ukraine will collapse in a couple of days." And it was, now it's, Ukraine is, going to win, and we don't need to even give them any more help. They can just walk around and beat the Russians. So I'm somewhat skeptical of those people who've never been to the front, or a lot of them haven't even been to Ukraine, who are suddenly experts. Now everybody's the Ukrainian military expert. I think candidly, we need to also recognize the losses that Ukraine's taken. I mean, your best prepared forces have been in battle. Almost every active or even reserve territorial unit now, most of the territorials are at the front. Even with a low level of combat, it's not unusual to have 1% attrition a day. So if you just take it and add up, so a lot of your best guys have been wounded or lost. You replace them with reservists. Some of those are now lost. So the territorials, it's a great idea. Unfortunately, it was implemented way too late, and so they're trying to make up for it now. But they need heavier weapons. They need better command and control. They need better integration with the regular military. So the cost and the impact on the Ukrainian forces is not unsubstantial, and I don't think you're anywhere near danger or defeat, but it is costly. And one of the reasons why I've been arguing, I and General Clark, for example, Jen Breedlove, have been arguing strongly that we need to send more equipment. Is you look at it, and you've lost a lot of you lost, let's say 50% of your tanks. Okay, yes, you captured some Russian tanks, but what has been ignored is the Russian targeting of Ukrainian industrial defense industry. Ukronboron Prom's various facilities, and so you've the ability to repair and return to service your own vehicle losses, let alone make use of Russian equipment that you've captured, much of which is damaged. It just is very time consuming, so you're not getting replacements as fast as you need. I had a great conversation with the Polish chief of defense, and he promised me at the time and delivered Polish tanks, which was a godsend. But you need more. In my opinion, we need to supply you with not only American Abrams, and waiting for German Leopards is kind of I would say, a dream. So let's just forget that one. What really you need is infantry fighting vehicles, and we need to send you several thousand of our Bradleys, because your infantry fighting vehicles and Russian infantry fighting vehicles have taken catastrophic losses. So how do you do a counteroffensive if you have tanks but the troops are walking? You've done it in the terrain in the Kharkiv Oblast, but as you get out on the steppes, whether in Kherson or in the area between Donetsk and Zaporozhye, that open terrain, your infantry needs mechanized vehicles, not to mention artillery. And your own artillery is good, but you have enough tubes. You're running low on old Soviet ammunition, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that. And I think most NATO countries that have stocks have already supplied them to you. So then the question is, okay, how do we replace your artillery? So it's not just a matter of sending more artillery; it's sending systems, the weapons. It's not just a matter of sending ammunition; it's a matter of sending the artillery tubes as well. And then there's the debate about HIMARS, which I think is ridiculous. But we can talk about escalation if you want.
Yeah, we will talk about this escalation, and we will talk about this approach that Biden administration uses, the management of the escalation. We will give Ukraine some weapons, but not much, just to control the level of this escalation. And I just wanted to ask you: is it the rational approach to think so, to view this war in this way?
So there's a couple of rationales for it. Some make sense, and some I strongly disagree with. But one that makes sense is there was concern whether Ukraine could actually absorb that equipment. And it's not only bringing the equipment in, but it's training, it's the spare parts, the replacement pieces, and it's being able to sustain it. Is it the reason why we still don't see Abrams tanks or F-16s on Ukrainian battlefield? So, yes, in part, and I'll come back to that. But the other argument was, an argument that's been around for a long time, is when you're trying to deter or prevent an opponent from doing something, there's a phrase that says, damage, the threat of what is to come is more deterring than damage already done. So they were holding out the threat of sending more stuff in the hopes that Russia wouldn't escalate. And there is an analytical argument for that. Unfortunately, empirically, it failed in this case. Okay, so it's like threatening to stop a bully by taking his lunch money away, and in the end, all you end up with was an aggressive bully who's hungry. So what needs to be done now, and Russia's clearly escalated politically once again in terms of this incorporation of of their aggressive trying to integrate their aggression. So the natural response is to say, okay, let's stop talking about escalation. Why is it that Russia can fire missiles 1,000 kilometers, not only from Russia, but from Belarus? They can fire it from the Black Sea. They can fire it over NATO territory and hit targets in Ukraine. But somehow it is escalatory for Ukraine to have a missile that can hit 30 kilometers inside Russian territory. It is obscene. And we in the West, in my opinion, need to stop that, and particularly in the United States. It requires American leadership. We have pre-positioned equipment in Europe that could be delivered, tanks, artillery, HIMARS, that could be delivered to Ukraine within several weeks. Up till now, the Biden administration has not wanted to give American active stocks, either in Ukraine or in the United States, either in Europe or in the United States, to Ukraine. But I think we have enough in the reserves and in stocks that we ought to start taking the forward assets, sending them to Ukraine, and then backfilling them with active forces in the United States, and backfill those from reserves, and backfill those from storage stocks. It makes sense, and when it's the only answer to Putin's actions and threats.
Okay, what do you think happened with this land lease program? This land lease order was signed by President Biden in May. Now we actually are. October is coming. We are actually in the beginning of October, and we do not see this land lease program working in Ukraine. Do we still wait some more? To wait some more, actually. Yeah.
So I don't know if you know that in the summer of 2014, the first time land lease was mentioned was in a report to the U.S. Congress by General Clark and I, and we've been pushing it ever since. The Biden signed the thing in the spring, but it required, or they depended on Congress to authorize it, which was dependent on the defense authorization this fall. But it's important to remember that Lend-Lease is not a credit card. It's not like,
unlimited card, unlimited.
Yeah, here's your deal. Well, even if there's a financial limit, but now order whatever you want. 1,000 Abrams, 2,000 airplanes, whatever you want. Go have fun. I call it my kids' credit card. Hey, Dad, can I borrow the card for a night out? I go, what the hell? It requires sort of approval, and it's a good idea. It's still valid. I encourage people not to give up on it. And
sorry for interrupting. Well, the question is, was it just a political trick for Biden's administration just to show its support to Ukraine in the most critical moment of history, or is it a real program that will help in the future?
No, I would call it a strategic option or initiative. But before the war, during the first 7 years of the war, we would parse out aid. Okay, here's 800 million, and here's this deal here. I mean, there were a whole bunch of countries around the world received a hell of a lot more than we're giving Ukraine. And each one of those was a little parsed out. And, oh, yeah, you can have a few this, you can have a few that. It took me 4 years of arguing for javelin to finally get the first javelins in the country. So it was so what this does is allows to have a funding set aside, and it is not dependent on individual, that the amounts have to be authorized each time. Instead, there's a pool that can be drawn from it.
Got it. So
that is really important. That is really important. Okay, and it allows you to talk about in billions, not in terms of millions. It allows you to talk about being able to borrow on the future, not just merely having American taxpayers pay it out right now, but Ukraine is treated as a loan, but that loan is not due for decades. So that's really important.
Correct. Got it. So another question about the weaponry. We mentioned Abrams tanks. Now the question is, how possible is to see on the Ukrainian battlefield some military aircrafts given transferred from USA, some fighter jets, F-16s, other ones, older ones probably. Is it possible to see them maybe next year in Ukraine? Possible?
Absolutely. Probable? If it was me, it would already been happening. So if you ask me what priorities do you think Ukraine needs, my first one would be getting you infantry fighting vehicles, the Bradley, because your infantry badly need it. And when we could supply those relatively fast, and I don't think it's escalatory or controversial to get, it's just a matter of people deciding, hey, it's important, let's get it done. And by the way, they carry an anti-tank guided missile, the TOW-2, which will kill a Russian, even a T-90 tank. So they're some of the most survivable infantry fighting vehicles around, and we have enough of them. So that would be my number one immediate priority. The second is to get the longer range HIMARS, not just to strike deep, but so you can be more efficient and you can fire across the frontage. So you can also have them not be as vulnerable by having them deployed so close to the front. Aircraft. I think the key is it needs to be recognized that it takes time to train pilots and it takes time to train ground crews. It's not just a matter of getting the plane, but you have to have the plane and all its spare parts and brought in. Now, having said that, there are a lot of pilots and ground crews, not just in the United States who are retired, not in the United States, but in Europe. F-16s, for example, were one of the most popular planes in Europe. There are literally 1,000 pilots and ground crews who could be volunteers. Instead of having volunteers be infantry, which, okay, that's nice, but you have plenty of infantry, have volunteers be the pilots, at least for the beginning, and then you have them train they then train the trainers. They then train your guys, and your guys' best pilots, and then train the most of them. I think that's certainly possible. F-16 is a good vehicle, and there are F-16s available. Again, and the next one would probably be A-10s. They're relatively easy to fly. More challenging and long term, though I think critically important, are F-15Es. It's called the Strike Eagle, which not only has a very sophisticated air defense capability, but also long-range strike capability. But that's probably further out. So if I was, not that they've asked me, but I think I'm not alone. General Breedlove, General Clark, General Deptula, who's probably America's leading expert on air power, all say, okay, start with F-16s, add A-10s as available, and then in the long term, top it off with some F-15s.
Got it. And what about anti-aircraft defense? You know, in the beginning of the war, lack of Ukraine air defense weaponry was a big problem. Now we finally see that USA is ready to give Ukraine NASAMS systems. Only 2 batteries, not much. But what about Patriot system, other systems? Will we see them in Ukraine someday soon?
I think, my personal opinion is you're going to see them in Ukraine. Not soon. Why? For one thing, they're extremely expensive. Secondly, we do not have enough for allies who've already purchased them and are waiting for the delivery. It's just production is just slow. So there's a long lead time, and given the cost. The value of, in my opinion, we're going to eventually see and why do I say, well, you will eventually get them? I believe that at some point Ukraine is going to be a member of NATO. When Ukraine is a member of NATO, I think we're also going to end up building a air defense coverage that starts in Finland and Sweden, goes to the Baltics, goes through Poland, which is ordering Patriot already, and then comes through Ukraine and covers the Black Sea. That is a natural air defense system. Actually, we actually built such a system back in NATO. It was called the Nike Hercules and the Hawk Belt, and it was done with infrastructure funds. So, meaning that all the nations contributed, and then those who got it were those who needed it, and they didn't have to necessarily pay for it or pay for all of it. So that's a natural approach, and I think that will eventually happen. But I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 years.
Today, another significant event happened. Vladimir Putin signed documents about the annexation of the lands in the east and south of Ukraine, actually 4 regions partly occupied by Russians. He has also given a long speech before that about how evil and rotten Western countries are. It sounds like he is already at war with the USA and with the Western world. Do you believe that Putin is searching for this big war with the strongest rivals in the world, or he just pretending?
Well, if you go back even to his speech in August and then just prior to the invasion, Putin is essentially defined. He's been very clear. I'm not trying to bring back the Soviet Union. I'm trying to bring back the Russian Empire. And then you look at it and you go, well, where was the Russian Empire in the West? Well, it included Finland, included the Baltics, included half of Poland, Romania, Ukraine, Belarus, and on and on and on. And so, in that sense, it is a declaration of strategic intent, and if anybody opposes it, then somehow they're villainous and an enemy of Russia. Okay, so it's not necessary. I don't think he's looking for a declaration of war on Russia. He's essentially looking for a declaration of Russian empire under the expectation, again, delusional, that the West is just going to give in and say, oh yeah, Vladimir, go ahead. These people don't have he says that they have a right to exist, but they don't have a right to have their own country. Well, the hell with you. Who's he to say that? So I think that's really what he's about. And then of course, now he has this little game he's playing with, I have incorporated these new aggressive territories that I just stole, and therefore they're now part of Russia, and therefore I'm going to use nuclear weapons if anybody dares to try and take them away from me. Again, I think that's delusional.
Okay.
Dangerous, but
dangerous but delusional. And what is your opinion on Belarus? Is Putin able to force Lukashenko and his army to attack Ukraine directly, or Belarusian military will stay aside from this war?
So Lukashenko always amazes me. I mean, he weaves back and forth. So he's Putin's best buddy, but somehow, and you can attack from my turret, or my guys don't want to go.
A sly guy, very
Yeah, he's playing it back and forth, and forth. I think if Putin does an extended mobilization, not a partial but extended, which I think is likely given the failure of the partial, then at some point, probably at earliest spring, early summer, you may see then Russian forces moving into Belarus again and threatening not just Kiev, but Western Ukraine, potentially, and trying to stretch Ukrainian defenses over a 3 times larger area. And that's worrisome. They've also deployed Iskander missiles, and Lukashenko has said that Putin offered him nuclear weapons. Now, for a guy who has played a wily game, I think that was even if it's true, I think it's extremely stupid comment, because he just put himself on NATO's nuclear target list. The issue about nuclear weapons is probably the issue we're going to be struggling with over the next few weeks, next few months, actually.
Yeah, these nuclear threats are once again on Kremlin's table. Putin in his propaganda often mentions Russian nuclear weaponry and ability to strike Ukraine or other territories by tactical missiles. Is he bluffing, or how real it can be?
So it can be real. So people say, and the question is, what would he target? Right. And what do we target it with? So the Russians have a wide range of tactical delivery systems. They have a couple thousand. I gave a lecture on this in Ukraine, I think in 2017 at your diplomatic academy on Russia's nuclear capability, and it certainly hasn't gone down since. So they have several thousand tactical nuclear warheads, and they can be, and there are ones for artillery, which are short range and very low yield. In the world, when we talk about, people think, oh, nuclear weapon went off, is the world going to end? Not necessarily, because these are very small. Now, some of them, if you think of the smallest Russian nuclear weapon, it's sort of the size of the explosion of the 2 airplanes hitting the World Trade Center. If you kind of want to visualize the amount of the size. So you say, yeah, it's bad, but it's not the end of the world. And then they can go up from there, almost 1 million times larger in size. The question is, what would he target? So he could target Ukrainian forced troops, possibly, and when he would hit, you use it traditionally. If you're firing nuclear artillery, you're using them as a package. You're using a half a dozen or so. So you're trying to cover a key units on a key axis, whether you're attacking or defending. Okay, so you could do that. And for those troops in that area and for that effort, that would be catastrophic. But that doesn't necessarily change the course of the war. You still got to have forces either exploited or. So I don't see that as being decisive. What I have noticed lately was funny when I first came this year when I first arrived in Ukraine last spring. And Lviv was under air attack, and the Russian missile was taking out the electrical system of the Ukrainian railroad in Lviv. Last time I left Ukraine, there was a air raid over Kiev, and I happened to be on a railroad train. What I've noticed, kind of from a personal, having experienced it personally and then watched, they've been sort of systematically trying to hit with conventional weapons and not succeeding real well. Taking out Ukrainian electrical grid, particularly for the railroad. And now you notice recently they've been, as they were losing in Kharkiv Oblast, they were also taking out infrastructure position, particularly electrical. Why? Well, because 95% of Ukraine's long-range rail is dependent on electrical. And there's 3 major east-west rail lines. So if one targets a dozen or so electrical generating facilities and a few bridges, it has a huge impact on the ability to move logistics and reinforcements from the west, from Poland to Western Ukraine. and that's fairly serious. So that could be a target structure. And then you can say, well, okay, yeah, I could hit a few airfields, but I don't think there's enough Ukrainian aircraft left concentrated on airfield to really make that an attractive target. And then you're also getting much closer to cities. So then the next question is, okay, well, would he try to hit a city and use, catastrophic damage to kind of force, a la Hiroshima, to force Ukraine to capitulate? And then the question is, all right, what does the West do about it? So by treaty, any member of NATO that gets hit with a nuclear weapon, the U.S. is obligated to respond with a nuclear weapon.
Got it.
We're not obligated to respond to a nuclear weapon hitting Ukraine. The administration has said unambiguously that would produce catastrophic response for Russia, and that they have spelled out to the Russians what that would be in more detail, so it's not ambiguous to them. I don't know what that is. I believe them. And if a Russian strike was fairly small, tactical, or even hitting your logistics facilities, American global strike conventional capability could still do we can sink the Russian Far East Fleet, the Baltic Fleet. There's a number of things we could do conventionally to respond to that. By the way, the Russians played that scenario in the 2017 Zapad exercise, where they were invading the West, Ukraine and the West, and then we used a conventional global strategic conventional capability, and then things went off, and Putin was on TV literally smiling, pushing the button. Oh, look at this, I'm going to end the world with this button. So in my opinion, there is and in your own intelligence, which I think, by the way, I'd like to have a compliment to the head of your Ukrainian military intelligence, all the people in Ukrainian military intelligence. They have been consistently accurate. They recently, just in the last few hours, said there's a danger of a realistic danger of Russians firing off a nuke. So I think we need to take it very seriously. Having said that, I think it's complete. That is idiocy or again delusional on Putin's part. It was interesting. I gave a speech on the danger of Russia using nuclear weapons, and I made the point that the winds blow east to west. So if they use a lot of nuclear weapons, they're sending the radiation right. And I thought it was really interesting. I'm not saying he's responding to me, but I'd never heard him say this before. 2 weeks after I gave that talk in his deal, he goes, "Well, I'm not bluffing. And by the way, the winds can turn around and go a different direction." I go, "Okay."
Yeah, that's the important thing to mention. Dr. Karber, I'm very fascinated with our conversation, but our time is running out. We are talking already for more than 40 minutes, much longer than we planned to do. So I have to say goodbye, but I hope to see you soon on our channel once again someday soon. I hope we will survive this nuclear attack from Russia, or it may not happen. We hope so. So thank you once more for this conversation, for this dialogue, for this interview. I would be happy to see you once again on our show. And dear audience, thank you for watching. You were watching Channel 24. Our guest today was Dr. Phillip Karber from USA. Hope to see you soon on our channel with our new guest.